So, forgive me for the timing of everything. This video is going to be coming out, just a few hours before the Canucks play off against the New Jersey Devils. And while there are some notes that we could go out there and talk about with that game, Artur Silayev is going to start. There are some expectations that other players need to fulfill. While there are some storylines in that respect, I feel like those lifespans aren't really too long. Once the game is over, we'll have our conclusions as to how Silayev is going to play, but this topic instead is one that I think actually does have a bit of stopping power and can continue to be relevant as the days go on. Because today what I wanted to do was talk about a player whom the Vancouver Canucks acquired to be a pretty big deal on this team. We're talking about Jake DeBrusk, because when it comes to his start with the Vancouver team this season, it unfortunately has not gone as smoothly as a lot of people would have wanted, and a lot of people includes Jake DeBrusk himself, because he recently had himself an interview on Daily Hive wherein he spoke out about his disappointing start. But before we dive into that, let's talk about Jake D. He's 28 years old, 6 feet, 196, left-handed guy, signed on to the out of 2032, making $5.5 million a year. We're in the pipe, 5x5. Jake DeBrusk last year had 40 points in 80 games played. He had 50 points in 64 games the year before that. But this year, he only has 4 points in 8 games and 0 goals to boot. Now, sure, he is on pace for 41 points, which would roughly be in the same wheelhouse as what he did last season, but the fact that he's got 0 goals and only 4 assists isn't necessarily ideal. It especially isn't ideal when you acknowledge that DeBrusk was a beast for Boston in the playoffs last year, putting up 11 points in 13 games played. This guy was a menace, and I think that's part of the reason he was able to get the contract that he did. That compiled with the opportunities, he wanted more of a role, he wanted to not be second fiddle in Boston to Pastrnak, to Marchand, to everybody else that they had in there, and the Vancouver Canucks had themselves a chance to give DeBrusk line time with Elias Pettersson, and that was seen as a really hard sell. DeBrusk started out the year with 4 points in 5 games, but eventually went 3 games without a point in games against the Carolina Hurricanes, the Pittsburgh Penguins, and the Chicago Blackhawks. So, DeBrusk hasn't necessarily been the best. I'll say this from my own point of view. I think that he's been fine. He's been a lot better than some of the other players we have seen rotate around the Vancouver Canucks forward core the past few years. I actually think that Jake DeBrusk has had a very solid tenure and a solid start with Vancouver so far. I don't think there's anything about his game that I could say is necessarily bad, with the exception of him not scoring as many points as he might have wanted to. Some of the passes that he has made, some of the goals or the shots that he has made, some of them go wide, and that's, I think, the biggest mistake. But other than that, he forechecks hard, he makes some good reads. More times than not, he's making good play-continuing passes and shots that set up rebounds. He has been solid. The numbers just haven't been there. So when you talk about this article published on dailyhive.com by Noah Strang from 2 days ago, Canucks Jake DeBrusk is not happy with his start. I'm pretty hard on myself. It really starts to illuminate where this is going to go. So, let's dive into this right here. My start has been, to me, pretty disappointing, explained the 28-year-old today in an exclusive interview with Daily Hive. I would like to get on the board. I got a couple of greasy assists in there, but I haven't really played my game. I guess it's just 7 or 8 games in, but I'm pretty hard on myself. This is not necessarily unique. I'd say that a lot of players are hard on themselves. Elias Pettersson is hard on himself. Quinn Hughes hard on himself. Jake DeBrusk, not surprising to see that he is in that same boat. It's just a matter of time, I would say, before DeBrusk is really able to find his footing and start producing goals and getting those greasy net front tap-ins like we were advertised to see out of him. I had a look at my seasons, the last couple. I've always had a slow start out of the gate. I get hot in the preseason and then for some reason it doesn't want to go in, continued DeBrusk. I've got to force it more. I've got to be more aggressive. And you know what, I'll say this. Jakey D, I think he has been pretty aggressive throughout the course of this season. His forechecking is pretty strong, and his on-puck play is great too. I don't necessarily think that this guy needs to be in a more aggressive spot. But hey, if he wants to, that's totally fine. There's a lot that he can do to bring value to his game in deep, in the corners, and when he is trying to hunt down those opportunities. Continuing on with the conversation here, though, the Edmonton native was a Canucks premier free agent signing last summer, inking a deal that will cost the team $40 million over 7 years. Vancouver is just his second NHL home after spending 7 years with the Bees, and the transition has not come without growing pains. Coming into it cold turkey, I didn't really know what to expect, he said, when discussing this first month with his new team. There are some similarities to Boston, but I think there's probably more differences. But you look at the similarities, you try to take some comfort in it. There's different things, it's still kind of weird coming back to the rink. It takes some time. I was with Boston since 2015. That's the only thing I really knew, but I understood there were going to be some hiccups along the way. Obviously, I didn't really want the hiccups at the start, but I think it will get better. We've been winning games, which always helps. All I'm trying to do is just help the team win. And the article then talks about how while the points have not been there, DeBrusk has shown flashes. He has impressive speed and ability to carry the puck through the neutral zone. He's also created some chances off the rush, something that has been a focus for the team this season. And that is exactly what I think we are seeing as a fan base, that DeBrusk has a lot of good qualities. There are some things that he is doing. I don't think he necessarily has been disappointing in some respect. Aside the shots and the passes and the stuff not necessarily converting as much. This might just be growing pains, and for him to eventually ease into the Vancouver Canucks system and feel as comfortable here as he felt in Boston, that might take a little while. The best Boston Bruins hockey that Jake DeBrusk ever played came in the playoffs in 2024. He was drafted back in 2015, so it took 9 years for him to become that guy. Now, I get it, that's a little bit of a misleading statement since Boston didn't really progress with Jake DeBrusk in a way that allowed him to be a top guy. He was always second fiddle, and he had to work through a lot of that in his own time. But playing with guys like Miller and Besser, there's a lot of opportunity here. I think he's still trying to find a few things, said Rick talking about Jake DeBrusk this morning. He's trying to learn the system. If he plays a little more predictable hockey, plays a little more inside, I know his game will come. I'm not worried about him. There are glimpses that he's going to come out of it. JT Miller went out there and spoke about DeBrusk and his new line mate here. Speed and skill, responded Miller when asked about what the new winger adds to the trio of him and Besser. We still have more to give. There's been a ton of open communication with Jake, trying to be on the same page, trying to make things a little more automatic. And then the end of the article here talks about some JT Miller stuff. Millsy's the type of guy, he's going to lead the forecheck, and I think Jake, if he does that, comes up with loose pucks, he will get chances. So, you know what? I'm actually feeling pretty good about Jake DeBrusk this season so far. It's early. It's not necessarily the biggest reason to panic, but there is still some awareness going on here, you know? That's probably the best thing that we could conclude from this article, that Jake DeBrusk, while playing some pretty consistently good hockey and showing some glimpses of a level beyond that, is aware that he kind of has to get a little bit more production on the board. So I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. This video is coming before the Canucks are playing off against the Devils. That game is going to be on in about 3.5 hours, something like that, 3 hours. So hopefully there is a little bit of buzz around the Vancouver Canucks before that game goes live. Of course, we'll go out there and make another video when the game concludes and with all of the stuff that happened in it too. Maybe Jake DeBrusk gets his first goal today. Who knows? But other than that, I'm paying attention to the Hughes and Hughes matchup since Luke is finally back and he is looking pretty good. Having Jack, Luke, and Quinn on the ice once again is going to be a pretty great story. And for Vancouver, it's an opportunity to bounce back against the Carolina team that they really had no business winning against. So we'll tune back into the channel once that game is over, but for now, I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Jake DeBrusk, yay or nay, what are your thoughts on how he's played so far? I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.